With a myriad of living thoughts of devotion, I have built for thee a temple of awakened silence. I have brought the multicolored lamps of wisdom from all valid faiths. They shine with the luster of thy one truth. The commingled incense of human craving for thy love soars up in spirals from the incense bowl of our hearts. Thy sacred presence shines on altars everywhere. All prayers of all temples, tabernacles, churches, mosques, and viharas are chanting to thee in the universal language of deep love. The orchestra of our combined feelings plays in harmony with the chorus of all soul songs, with the cry of all tears, with the bursting shout of all joys, and with the united anthem of all prayers. In this wall-less cosmic temple of the soul, we worship thee, our one Father. Be pleased to reveal thyself to us always. Amen. Om. Amen. Isn't that a beautiful thought? The wall-less cosmic temple of the soul. And that is truly where we worship God. So each one of us is influenced by the part of the world we're born into, the family that we're incarnated into. And most of us have had a similar experience of starting out in the religion that our family chose for us, or perhaps no religion whatsoever. But at a certain point in our development, our soul's longing brings us to a point where we're searching for other ways to worship God, a more meaningful way. And the reason for that is that we have something called a karmic inheritance. It's what we are born with from our previous incarnation. Yogananda said that wherever we leave off in this incarnation, eventually we'll pick up in our next lifetime. So many of us were meditators at a certain point in our previous incarnations, and maybe even devotees of Yogananda or Kriyabans in a previous lifetime. And again, at a certain point in our development, the soul's longing helps us to sort of wake up. And it's not that the tradition that we came into isn't a bad tradition or it isn't good for us at that time, but eventually we might need more as far as going within our souls into that wall-less cosmic temple of the heart. And as our expansion, our awareness expands, we tend to have a desire for a more intimate relationship with God, and that ultimately brings us usually to meditation. Yogananda's first disciples in America, Dr. Lewis and his wife Mildred, were seekers. They were both born into Christian traditions, but they were part of a group in Boston of intellectuals who were seeking God in a different way. In fact, his wife, Mildred, Mrs. Lewis, she met Yogananda in 1920 at a lecture led by the local leader of the Rosicrucian order. And she was so excited when she met Master that she went home and told her husband, Dr. Lewis, all about him. Coincidentally, a few days later, another dear friend in their group of spiritual seekers named Alice Hazy, who later became Sister Yogamata, she had gone to the Unitarian Church, and Yogananda was there. I believe he spoke. And again, she was so thrilled by his vibration that she told her friends, the Lewises. And it was Alice Hazy who made the appointment for Dr. Lewis to meet Master on Christmas Eve. And many of us are familiar with this beautiful story where Dr. Lewis went to meet Master on Christmas Eve. And he said, I have so many questions. And he said, one of the questions I've been asking many people is, in the Bible it states, the light of the body is the eye. Therefore, if thine eye be single, the whole body shall be filled with light. And he said to Yogananda at the time, I've asked many people this question, and no one seems to know the meaning. And Yogananda's answer to him was, can the blind lead the blind? And what he meant by that was that unless you've had a direct experience of cosmic consciousness, how would you know what that meant? And he asked Dr. Lewis a few questions. He said, will you be my disciple? Will you love me always? And Dr. Lewis said yes. And they had that beautiful experience where they sat together on a tiger skin and they touched foreheads. And at that moment, Yogananda gave Dr. Lewis the Shakti Put, or the great experience of cosmic consciousness. Dr. Lewis said that he felt and saw the spiritual eye for the first time. He saw the golden ring, the blue light, and the little white star. And he felt his consciousness move through that beautiful white star. And he saw the 1,000-petaled lotus. And he had an experience of the holy vibration, the cosmic consciousness flowing through his body. So can you imagine what a blessing and what an incredible experience for him to have? Master showed Dr. Lewis the inner kingdom, and he showed him a different way of worshiping God through meditation, through focusing on the spiritual eye in deep silence, finding God, finding God's presence within us. And that's what we're being taught on this path of self-realization, is that we must worship God in spirit and in truth. And Master gave Dr. Lewis the experience of center everywhere, circumference nowhere. So when we talk about God and the holy vibration of spirit, there are no edges. There's no place that God ends. God is in everything. And so the more that we tune into that presence, that reality within ourselves, we can begin to expand our own awareness and have experiences of that circumference everywhere. And when we do that, we'll never feel lonely. We'll never feel left out, because we're always at the center of God's love, which resides in the center of our own hearts and at the point between our eyebrows. So we are under so much pressure right now. We all know this is a very difficult time. And something interesting happened a couple of weeks ago after our service. We have a little social satsang, and one of our dear Guru Bhais admitted that she felt angry at God. She felt upset, and she felt upset with Yogananda as well. And we've all been through periods of that in our lifetime where we feel mad at God, or we ask God, why me? Why is this happening to me? And it's a very powerful moment in our own transformation, because when we're mad at God or when we're upset about the situation in our life, it's because our ego is being triggered, because the ego wants to be in control of every situation. So when we find ourselves in a situation where we are out of control or we don't have much control, the ego really flares up, and that's a symptom of that. Master said it's okay to be mad at God. He said, talk to him like a friend. You can shout at him if you want to. But ultimately, we know that God loves us, and we want to go back to God as the source of our answers and our inspiration. It's the time when we're most uncomfortable in life that we grow the most spiritually. So this time, right now, we were born for this moment. We came here as devotees of a great self-realized master so that we could grow more than any other time in this incarnation. And we're really being put to the test. Yesterday, our dear friends in New York, Ananda, New York, has a beautiful Saturday satsang every Saturday afternoon at 4:30. If you haven't signed in, you just go to their website and click on the link. And each Saturday they have different speakers. And yesterday, Kalidas, a Vedic astrologer, and Kelly and I did our yoga teacher training with Kalidas. He's a wonderful soul, wonderful young man. And he was explaining yesterday that the planets currently in play for this crisis, this pandemic, are Saturn and Capricorn. And Saturn is the planet of the Muladhara chakra, the very base of our spine, the first chakra, the first energy center in the astral spine. And that energy center is all about our basic needs in life. It's about our fundamental foundation and security, about having enough food, having shelter, having money to pay our bills, being employed. So this pandemic and this situation we are in right now is really, really about the very foundation of life. And it's really triggering and bringing up all of these basic necessities. Will we have enough to eat? Will we have enough money? Can we pay our bills? Can we go back to work? And when you think about the astral spine and the chakra system, we've been given the keys to awakening on this path because we focus at the Agya chakra in meditation and in Kriya Yoga. And the chakra system, the astral spine, is just that. It's a system. So we never just work with one energy center at a time. So although the root chakra currently is being activated and might feel sort of chaotic, by simply bringing our awareness to the point between the brows, that energy has to rise up through all of the other energy centers. It has to come through the heart. It has to come to God. And when that energy rises up, it also releases and unlocks other situations in our life, other things that we need to transform. So this is really a powerful time astrologically and in history to us to get really deep into the astral spine through the Hong Sa practice, and if we're Kriya bonds, to really go deep into our Kriyas and help with that cleansing, to just release anything that is standing in our way of our personal, loving relationship with God. It's interesting because it takes between 1 and 3 billion years for carbon to turn into a diamond. And the only thing that separates a diamond from graphite, which are both carbon, is intense heat and pressure. So a diamond goes through this process in the earth of intense pressure and heat. So if you think about what we're going through right now, we are in this time of intense pressure. And if you think about the root chakra, it sits right on top of that sleeping serpent of Kundalini energy, which is represented by fire. So the heat of this moment, all of the transition we're going through, and the pressure of this moment are giving us the opportunity, the once-in-a-life opportunity, to turn ourselves into diamonds, into these rare gems of spiritual transformation. So if you do feel upset or you do feel a little bit mad at God, it's okay, but turn it around. That's what we're trained to do as yogis. We're trained to turn that energy around and bring it up and offer it to God. And with that attitude, there's nothing we can't do. There's nothing we can't do in this lifetime, including liberation. God must be sought daily in the silence of love. That is what our meditation and Kriya practice is. Devotion. Devotion brings attunement to God. So the more we can get into the heart center, the more we love God, the more devotion we show, the deeper our attunement and our direct experience of God in our own worship, in our personal temple of our hearts, will bring us into that alignment with God consciousness. And that alignment with God consciousness is what guides our life. It guides our thoughts, our deeds, our activities. And when we go into that flow of grace, there's nothing that can hurt us in life ultimately. Master said that love is the highest wisdom. And Swami Kriyananda once asked Yogananda what the most important qualities on the spiritual path were. And he said deep sincerity and devotion. So all paths leading to God start with love and devotion in our hearts. He also said, Yogananda also said, it doesn't matter how long one has spent on the spiritual path. What matters is how deeply we love and seek God. So we worship God in the silence of our hearts, and our relationship with God is the most intimate relationship we have. It's totally individual and unique, and it really depends on our own personal vibration. So the higher we lift our vibration, the more of God's vibration we'll receive. It's that simple. So the more we put into it, the more we receive from God. So it's really important right now. Today's reading is worship God in silence and in truth. It's so interesting right now. I'm sure everyone has had this experience within our own households, within our friend groups, and we can see it all across the country and the world. There's a lot of different opinions about how to handle the current crisis. Everybody has an opinion. And if you spend a lot of time on the internet, it can get really loud and chaotic because there's a lot of different things happening out there. And ultimately, God is truth. And the only place we're going to find God's truth is within our own hearts and within our own spiritual eye, within that relationship of bringing our awareness into the heart center in deep silence. God comes to us in deep silence of meditation. So it's really important now. It's okay to, of course, tune into all these beautiful satsangs and all these beautiful inspirations we have available to us, but the most important thing we can do right now, twice a day, is to shut everything else out, to tune it all out, and go into the heart center in deep meditation. And if you're looking for guidance and truth, ask God, ask Master. Master will give us the truth. He'll give us the intuitive wisdom to know the right choice in every situation. The power of devotion mixed with Kriya is one of the fastest ways to reach God and to have a cosmic experience of God's consciousness. There's a beautiful story of a man that Master met in India. He was a bhakti yogi, and Yogananda said as soon as he met him, he literally saw the love of God within and without and all around this man. He was a beautiful soul, and he had been seeking a direct experience with God for over 20 years, and he came to Yogananda and he was lamenting, I love God so much, but I haven't had that direct experience yet. And Yogananda said, let me give you Kriya initiation. And the man said no at first because he didn't want to stray from his path, which is very admirable, to really stick to your path throughout your incarnation. We're taught to do that. So this man was trying to stick to his own devotional path. But eventually Master did give him Kriya Yoga. He said to him, Kriya will fulfill you in your path of devotion. He said, you're like a man who has lived for 20 years in a room, and you've been trying to get out of the room through the walls, the ceiling, the floors. And what I'm offering to do is show you the door, to show you the way out. So the man did receive Kriya initiation, and he came back to Yogananda a week later in tears, and he said that he had an experience of cosmic consciousness through Kriya Yoga, through focusing at the Agya chakra. But the point of the story is it was his great devotion and love for God that prepared him to have that beautiful experience. Kriya Yoga takes you onto the universal highway where all bypaths of spiritual practice meet. God is love, and he must be sought in the silence and the love of our souls. So I'd like to end today by just talking a little bit about Swami Kriyananda, because it is Memorial Day and Swamiji had a birthday on Tuesday. And what Swami gave to us is the most perfect example of the guru-disciple relationship. He made these teachings alive for us through his music, his writing, and through his very presence. He really showed us what attunement means. You know, he taught us what it means to attune your consciousness, to remove your ego, and align your consciousness with that of a great self-realized master. And when we do that, that vibration flows through us, and it flows through everything we touch. And if you look at the life that Swami led and what he created virtually out of nothing, it's mind-blowing. But it just reminds us that God has the power to create anything we can dream of. And when we align ourselves with God's will, not our ego, but God's will, we surprise ourselves what we can accomplish in this lifetime. So my first meeting with Swami was at his birthday party, his 80th birthday party in 2006. So I was raised Catholic. I come from New England, and when I moved to California, I discovered Yogananda's teachings through SRF. And my mother knew that I was now following the teachings of an Indian guru. So for, you know, a New Englander Catholic mother to think her daughter moved to California and was now following a guru, that was a little hard for her to handle, but she knew that I loved God and she accepted it. But it wasn't until I moved back to Rhode Island and found Ananda that she really saw what I believed in. When Ellis was born, my daughter, we brought her to the yurt in Hopkinton, and that was the first time that my mother saw, were you there that day? Yeah, when my mother saw the beautiful pictures of our gurus, and you know, I was a little bit out of her comfort zone. So it was about a year later when my baby girl was about 18 months old that we were in California. I was still painting then as an artist, and I had a show in San Francisco. So my husband, my mother, and myself and the baby all went out to San Francisco, and Prem Shanti and Om Prakash had told us, or told me, that it was Swami's birthday celebration just a few days later, and we were going to be just a couple hours away. So we all went up there. We drove up to Ananda Village, and for any of you, this is my first time, for any of you who've been there, it's a white knuckle drive. You go up all these really winding roads, you go over the Yuba River, and it's stunningly beautiful. But my mother has an extreme phobia of the mountains, of all things. And it must be a past life phobia, but she's really frightened of the mountains. So by the time we got to Ananda Village, my mother was, needless to say, on the verge of a nervous breakdown. So my husband and my daughter decided to stay down at the little market area with the playground, and after about 30 minutes I said to my mother, why don't you come with me? We're going to go up to the Crystal Hermitage. I said, I was told it's just a short drive up the hill. So it was a short drive up the hill, but again, more hills, and my mother started to cry. She started to cry, and she became agitated and a little bit angry with me. We finally arrived, and we walked into the Crystal Hermitage, and the view from there is one of the most stunning you'll see anywhere. But it's not the view, it's the vibration. It's otherworldly. It's a vibration that Swami Kriyananda has created from many, many years, almost his entire lifetime of attunement to Master. And when we went into the venue, this beautiful home on the hill, and it was a beautiful garden party, and David Eby was playing the cello, and it literally was like an otherworldly event. And finally, Swami Kriyananda came out. He was very frail at that time. I don't remember exactly what the health issue was, but he needed help. And he sat down, and he only spoke for about 5 or 6 minutes because his energy was, he needed to protect his energy at that time. But I looked over at my mother, and all her fear and anxiety had washed away. And she just had this very peaceful look on her face. And it was such a blessing, such a joyous moment, because Swami, of course, just looking at him, he was literally a manifestation of peaceful energy. He was so peaceful and so sweet and so kind. And I had this really emotional moment where I looked over at my mother, and I felt this great blessing that now my mother actually could see the way that I chose to worship as an adult. And it wasn't about the pictures on the wall or how I could describe it to her, but she felt that vibration, peace in the atmosphere and in this location. And she felt that beautiful loving kindness and peace coming from Swami Kriyananda. So that was a wonderful blessing for me, and then allowed me to continue more deeply on this path with her blessing and understanding. So it's in the daily silence of our own hearts that we meet God. And again, that holy vibration we cultivate within ourselves. God is right here, right here. There's no separation. We just have to remove the ego, and we have to get into the heart and bring that energy up and join our energies, attune our energies to the Guru and to God, so that we can have that experience of loving God. The best way to worship God is with all of our heart, all of our mind, all of our strength, all of our love. And if we keep our attention always on God and Gurus, the pressure and the heat of our current test are just going to help turn us into diamonds, into these beautiful, radiant gems, rays of God's light in the world. And that is what the world needs now. The world needs love, compassion, and understanding. And we are here to offer that to others. Om.